Good evening. I hope, Monique, can you hear us on your side?
I can hear you vaguely from that side. The sound is better there where the panel is sitting.
All
When
right,
we tested it earlier.
you can hear me better now.
I can.
All right, I would like to welcome our guests that are with us here today. And I would also like to welcome those that are joining us online, those that are present with us here at TUT Department of Architecture. I will just do a very short welcoming, then I will allow Prof. Amira Osman, who is the Sachi that funds these talks, and also the incoming president, to just give a quick introduction before we introduce our speakers. In today's roundtable talk, as part of the In Plain Sight talks, okay, first of all, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Emmanuel Gambule. We are part of this project called In Plain Sight, and at the moment, I'm also talking as an acting HOD for the department. In introducing these talks, I just want to quickly say that we started off with one of the speakers today's, or one of the guests today's stories. And then we followed up with the documentary, and then we also had another talk for the other guests today that will be introduced. We are gathered here today because of their stories. We want to hear their stories. And there were very important 3 members of the Association of Black Architects, which was concluded. I say concluded because once they achieved the goals that they wanted to achieve, they then wrapped it up. In our quest to search for a professional identity rooted in the stories of those that came before us, we are honored to have Linda Mvusi, Mr. Mohammed Mayet, and Mr. Aziz Tayob with us here today. Their stories are not just for Black people, but they are for South Africa in all her glorious colors. Until all the stories of all the people who are part of our architectural profession are told, their stories beyond racial boundaries, beyond class and ethnical boundaries, then our story as a profession is incomplete. So we are hoping that as we hear their stories, that story of the profession in architecture is then completed. Then lastly, the idea that we don't live on earth forever encourages as mankind to make room for others, to pass on the baton, to leave a kind deed, to leave a skill, to leave a kind word, and to leave some useful advice. And most importantly, to also pass on their values. And we hope that this platform today will serve to do that, both in the exhibition that is outside of their work and from their stories and the discussion that we'll hear today. So without wasting time, I will ask Professor Amira Osman to quickly say something, then I will hand over to Mr. Abdul. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Welcome to our esteemed visitors. Welcome to the audience. Welcome to those watching online. What an incredible honor. It really is an honor. And when I walked in this afternoon, Dr. Nkambule, our HOD, our acting HOD, he said to me, I don't know why we do this. You know, he looked exhausted. And I think I know why we do this, and we keep on doing it because we're incredibly passionate about it. And we believe that we have a message to convey. When we're in the middle of it, we get thoroughly exhausted. I was just telling Dr. Shaba Mape how exhausting my year has been. But we do this because we believe we have something to say. And that's why we are so incredibly honored to have you here today and to be able to hear your stories. And that is why my project supports and funds these kinds of initiatives. So who am I, for those of you that don't know me? My name is Amira Osman. I hold a position, it's quite a complex and long name, so I'll try and keep it short, but it's the NRF South African Cities Network, DST, SACHI Chair in Spatial Transformation, between brackets, positive change in the built environment. It's a mouthful, but I think every word in there is meaningful. As Dr. Nkambuli said, I'm also the incoming president of the South African Institute of Architects. And transformation is my agenda. Transformation is my day-to-day work. And my title is Chair in Spatial Transformation, but I don't believe we can achieve spatial transformation if we don't transform the way we think, if we don't transform the way we practice, if we don't transform the way we teach. So transformation is not just a numbers game in terms of the demographic change. It really needs a mind shift. In my manifesto as the incoming president of SIA, I wrote that the architectural profession has a critical role to play in the achievement of settlements that are equitable, beautiful, and functional. Settlements that increase opportunities, offering people a better chance at improving their lives and livelihoods. And I believe that the profession has the potential to offer both technical and social expertise towards these aims, and that is the driving force behind everything that I do. And I also believe, and this is something that sometimes makes people nervous, but I have a feeling that it might come out in the conversations, that everything is connected. Nothing is entirely isolated. Architecture is political. Buildings, technology, design, and space are political. Decision-making in the built environment is political. Material selection and detailing are political. Everything we do is value-based. Nothing is neutral. How we build, where we build, how we make decisions about our cities and neighborhoods says something about our belief systems. And because it's value-based and because it's linked to our belief systems, that is why we really want to hear your stories and understand what drives you and what what kind of helped you in your decision-making throughout your careers. So in addition to the many hats that I wear, I'm also the director. I launched something called Platform 100. It's a think and do tank. And the other directors on Platform 100 are Dr. Nkambule and architect Mokena Makeka. And so we saw as Platform 100 that in plain sight is such a significant archiving activity. It's such a significant activity for us to sponsor, to fund, to support, because it's bringing to light these unheard stories. We are so incredibly honored to have you. And as with my very many hats, I welcome you, but mostly as the director of Platform 100. And I hope that we will be supporting more of your activities, Emmanuel. And yes, it gets exhausting, but we do it. And you can see that it will influence the future generations as well. So we truly, truly appreciate your presence here with us tonight. And thank you so much.
Good evening to all our online guests and all our esteemed guests who are with us in person. We really appreciate the opportunity to have such an evening. I want to take the opportunity to thank our speakers tonight, Ma'am Linda Mvusi, Mr. Mohammed Mayet, and Mr. Aziz Tayob. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to also just take a short moment to introduce what we are doing here today. I'm going to read an excerpt from our social media posts that we've been making about today's event, just to also give a little bit of background as to how important it is. Architects Linda Mvusi, Mohammed Mayet, and Aziz Tayob reunite for the first time in 30 years to reflect on their careers and the work done by the Association of Black Architects. The roundtable discussion is a retrospection of the association's role in developing the careers of Black practitioners, and importantly, whether the industry has transformed in the past 30 years. The group exhibition in plain sight features the works of the three architects. This exhibition, for our guests who are here today in person, is what is presented in the foyer of our building here at TUT. The work on view explores how drawings best narrate the architect's story in practice, whether referring to the practice of resilience during times Black architects and designers were excluded from many spaces, or the practice of how to design when you are excluded from many spaces. The drawings encourage the young Black architect and designer to reimagine their practice as individuals and as a collective. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Tebogo Ramatlou for a brief introduction of our moderator, and then we will get the ball rolling. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tebogo Ramatlou. I'm a lecturer here at the Department of Architecture at TUT. I would like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Chaba Mape. I hope our friendship still continues after this because I hijacked him in the last minute. And we are hoping that in this discussion that we're able to find some answers and to our questions as to what it was like back in the time, and for us, the future generation of architects, as to how do we carry on onto the baton. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Chaba Mape from Wits University in Johannesburg. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to be here to moderate this very special event. And I'm very honored to do so because these are people that myself I've looked up to in my career as an architect and as a student at Wits University. I remember we had a field trip where we visited some of Mohammed's buildings. He won't remember me, but I remember him from that time. And I just want to start by saying that for me, people like this really make me feel at home because I grew up in a family that was very political. My father was a struggle. He was part of the struggle, went to Robben Island for 5 years as a political prisoner, imprisoned because he was a terrorist, according to the apartheid government. And, you know, I grew up around people who I called uncle and auntie, who were all people who were trying to change our society. And for me, this is really, you know, an emotional and touching moment because I view these people in the very same way as uncle and auntie who were actually struggle heroes. And I really respect that. So thank you so much for honoring me to be the person who's here with you right now today. So I think to start the conversation, I'm going to ask you three to just tell us a little bit about yourselves. And I think for me, I'm really interested in hearing about what drives you. Not just, you know, what kind of buildings you've done and what kind of things you've done, but, you know, from your own philosophical standpoint as a person, your outlook in the world, what drives you? And I'll start this side with you, Linda.
I was going to ask if you can start with. But first of all, thank you so much for having us here. It's a very special moment, very emotional. It's almost 30 years, it's 29 years. And at least was it 2 months ago, we met. And as you can see, we're old and silver-haired. And this is really historic, and I just want to thank TUT and everybody involved in making this happen, in creating this reunion. But I would ask you to start with these two gentlemen because they were in the belly of apartheid. I grew up outside South Africa.
Yeah.
So if you start with them, then.
All right, we'll get to you eventually. So there's no running away. I'll start with you, Mom.
Thank you for having us. I think the most important thing, while Linda was outside, and I think probably for me worth mentioning, and I think I just spoke to Linda about it earlier, is that whilst we were involved in the practice of architecture, we call it practice because it was not normal practice, because we were really doing incestuous work, working within the very communities we lived in, very places where we worked in. So we were not really part of the dialogue of the country. We were actually excluded from this profession in the real sense of the word. So we were doing work within ourselves, for ourselves in some ways, for the very buildings that we were going to be using once they were built. But Linda exposed us to, when we met her and when she spoke about and the passion she spoke about some of the challenges that really lied ahead. So we started thinking that the vision is actually probably the potential of doing something better. And I think what architecture is special to me is when I see a smile on somebody's face when he uses some place or spatial experience. And for me, in reality, as simple as it is, that is really what we're trying to achieve. And a lot of our special moments about spatial experiences, spatial experiences, no matter the surrounding thing, no matter how oppressive it was, became special moments in your life. And they became, refuge from some of the rigors and the difficulties of living in an apartheid system. I remember playing soccer at the magistrates' courts, and there was one person's job was to watch for what we would call the blackjacks or the police to see that they wouldn't arrest you, because you're not allowed to play in a government facility. But those were the only open spaces we had in the cities that we grew up. I remember having my first swim at the Hollard Street fountains because there was no swimming pools, and that fountain, dirty water, that's where we experienced dunking our heads in underwater for the first time. So these kind of spatial experiences as children were actually fantastic experiences. But the issue was that as an architect, we suddenly realized that you had the power to make your community experience those special moments.
Wow.
And this could really be the liberating element about feeling special, or privileged space, as we call it. How do you make people feel special? And I think with all the challenges that we had, that was really what we tried to achieve, and how best we could make of the place and the moment, or whatever little of that present moment that we had, how best we could actually do it. Most of our early work was rooted in community work. And I said, a lot of my early practice was related to a group of people within my own community who had access to bank loans. So they were mostly medical professionals actually. So a lot of my early work was actually houses. And what is very interesting is that there was this great sort of urge to create something different, because they wanted to differentiate themselves from the rest. Purely, this was a way of getting around the sort of the doldrums of the system. How to create something that makes them feel different or look different, or experience something different. And that's why I even said that why the modern movement in some ways was a natural refuge for a lot of our early work in terms of the dialogue that we did. We didn't get into the vernacular or the local, typology, because that would have been going back into the conversation of the apartheid, argument about each one to himself.
So I'm hearing the word hope because you're really painting a picture that in a situation where, you're saying it was quite dreary and it was quite, an unpleasant environment. I mean, we all know that there were these moments, or you saw an opportunity to create moments of joy and beauty amongst that situation.
Absolutely. I mean, just to further emphasize, I grew up in a place where we didn't even have a library. I know the school library was literally a cabinet of that size that you would, by the end of the sort of 2 years, you virtually have read every book there. But this was the reality of it. So spaces were always, when white folks had gone out of the city in the weekends, that's when we somehow used them. Hopefully the police couldn't see you. So there was this abnormal life, but as children, I always remember my first experience of a restaurant was in the old days, Lorenzo Marx. When I came back to the city and I told my dad, couldn't we go to that restaurant? And I don't remember his answer, but he sort of he didn't really explain the situation. It was a place that's not accessible to you. So spatial exclusion was very much part of your upbringing, but you made the best of it. Or you created the story around it that was, to your liking, or it made you feel good about yourself.
All right. I hope you guys don't mind because I really cannot get myself to calling you Aziz. I'll have to call you Uncle Aziz because my dad will kill me. Now I'm going to call an elder in all respects Aziz. So Uncle Aziz, please tell me for you, what was driving you? What has been driving you? Just give us a little bit about who you are and what makes you tick.
Sure. I'm honored to have the title of uncle. I'm still just 81 years young. And
only not so close to the TV. Please move back.
if I start off and say, I didn't want to be an architect. My passion was to do medicine. But in those years, you had to apply for a permit to go to university after you've done matric. I grew up in a small little dorpy called Brits, which is approximately 40 kilometers from here. There we only had a 2-classroom school. Grade 1, grade 2 and standard 1 was 1 class. And then standard 2, 3, 4 and 5 was in another classroom. So we were placed in rows, and without having to go into too much detail, the teacher taught first the first standard, the second, the third, and the fourth. So by the time you get to the end of the years, you know everything about standard 1, standard 3 up to 5, or grade 1 to 2. I had a handicap, and I didn't know that I had an eyesight problem. I could see, I was nearsighted. And when December came, teachers said, anyway, the teacher, when the principal came to check the children's education, the teacher took my book away and hid it. And when the principal was finished with the book, she put it back. And then she called my father, and this was already She said, I don't know what's wrong with this child. He does well, but when it comes to exams, he can't, she didn't say, she didn't know that I can't see the blackboard, and neither could I express myself. Anyway, after that, so my brother was 1 year ahead of me always, and he was going to come by train to Pretoria, to my grandfather's place here in Pretoria, where the Reserve Bank stands today. That was our home, my granny's home. And then I insisted, I told my father that I know everything about. So that's how I got through all the standards up to standard 5, because the teachers knew that if there was an oral exam, I could answer, but if there was a written exam, I couldn't, because I couldn't see what's written on the board. So I could never answer the exam paper. And when I got to Pretoria, first thing I did was I ran for the first desk, the front desk, and a big guy came and he says, I pushed my bag aside and said, I'm sitting here, you get yourself somewhere else. And I said, no, this was quite a big guy, and the teacher saw this. And I said, I came here first, and I put my bag in there, and he threw it away. So he says, why do you want that? So I said, I want to see the board, what's being written on the board. That's for the first time the teacher said, can you not, why don't you go to the back? I said, no, I came here, and I came first, and therefore I want the seat. The teacher then said, can you not see, why don't you want to go to the back? I said, I can't read from the back. And the teacher wrote a letter to my father that take this guy to an optician. There's something wrong with him. So the optician had all the charts, A, B, C, D, or large letters, small letters. And when there's an E, I would say that's an O. My father said, you're in standard 5 now. And you still can't say ABC. Anyway, so the optician told me, just wait, this man has got an eye problem. And all right, after that, I could start seeing, and the elders would say to me that just wait until you get to standard 6, the high school, then you won't be able to get the marks that you're getting now. But anyway, I could see in standard 6, and after that, it was smooth sailing because my eyesight was suddenly open. And so my education started at standard 6.
Wow.
All right, so it was a school we used to travel to Bantuli Station. We met up with a lot of friends at the stations. That is mainly African friends who were also, going to school. One day was an elderly person, must be about 24, and he was going for high school education. So, but we made lots of friends. But anyway, let me get to the story. After I've matriculated, this permit system came out that you needed to get a permit to attend the university. And my passion was to do medicine. And it's not allowed. No, we can't offer you, but you can go to Salisbury Island, which is a newly established university for Indians only. And anyway, I wasn't too keen on that. eventually I wrote to Foreman Christian College in Lahore in Pakistan, and they accepted me for first year. And I completed that first year. I came for holiday. And I had picked up some encephalitis in the spine, infection in the spine, hospitalized for 6 months. I lost my term in Pakistan. And then on medical grounds, I took the Minister of Education to court. On health grounds, I'm applying for a permit for medicine. And right 4 months later, they said, all right, just leave out this court matter. We'll give you a permit. But we can't give you a permit for medicine because medicine, only one person, one Chinese is allowed, one Indian, one colored, and one black person. And that is already taken up. So you have to wait for the following year. So this is now 3 years after matriculation. I'm still looking at these people. 1 year was wasted initially. Second year was in Pakistan. This was the third year. And I said, all right, what can you accept? But what can you grant me? They said, well, medical is out, but we can grant you engineering or architecture. I thought that once I get into the university, I'll be there for about a month or so, and then I'll transfer into the medicine that I want to, or transfer into another course. Anyway, that was not, they control that situation. You can only, I did architecture, but it was all something that I didn't want to do, but it was interesting. I completed the first year, and I thought in the second year I applied for medicine again. But if you want, the class used to normally, it was quite, the lecturer was quite, all the lecturers were helpful as far as I was concerned. And eventually, there was also trips to factories for manufacturing glass, trips to brickyards. In fact, all different materials manufactured, we visited their factories. And they would say, we can't allow that non-white member because we don't allow non-whites to be visitors to our factory. So what the teacher did is, what the lecturer did is, he made me the monitor of the class, head of the classroom. So I had to arrange the lecture. So when the factory saw that they can't, unless I go with, nobody will come. They are targeting the architects. When they become future architects, they must specify all materials. Anyway, so that's how the years went. I was always the monitor. There were some people who didn't allow me to come at all, or didn't allow the entire class to come. Among them, maybe I shouldn't mention the trade name, but among them was the brick manufacturing. So when I qualified, I didn't specify those bricks. And I didn't specify those bricks, and I started using a brick that was not a member of the South African Brick Association. So I looked around until I found in Lenasia a brick plant that did clinker bricks, or just not face bricks, but semi-face bricks. And I used those bricks for a period of 10 years. And we won numerous awards with those bricks. And the big companies would come one member of the big companies came. Here I can mention a name, it was Coral Brick. And they said, why do you not specify our bricks? I said, one, you do not allow non-whites to lay bricks. A non-white can only hold a brick, load a brick, bring it in a wheelbarrow, give it to the bricklayer, but he's not allowed to lay the brick. So I said, that's your at the moment, and I'm becoming an architect, and I've got to tell bricklayers how to lay bricks. And that's what I've done with the semi-faced bricks. So until you change your attitude towards the non-white community, I will not. I will continue. They bought out this little Indonesia plant and closed it down. So I found another one in Nigel, and I used to travel around. I found brickyards even in Durban, and I used to have them railed. Anyway, merit awards continued, and I was grateful for that. But it was, for me, the price of the brick was 420 rand per thousand. So it was, for a small amount of money, I could do a house much cheaper than anybody else could. But anyway, this tells you something of that part of and I used to work with contractors who would employ, members from the African community, and there would always be a guard to see that those inspectors don't come and raid the building operations and so on. Anyway, I say that I enjoyed architecture. I enjoyed architecture, although I'll come now to the practice side. And I said, the Institute of Architects had laid down in those days the minimum that an architect can charge, not the maximum. The minimum that an architect can charge for designing buildings. And I used these bricks. I was only doing myself down because I earned less money. If I used an expensive brick, I would get more money. But the ethics that one learns is that's the minimum that you're allowed to use, because it was worked out, I think, by the Institute of Architects. That it's not possible. It's not possible to do it less than that amount of money. Because and this is it, that if you went under that fee, there's something going on that you might be getting cutbacks from the merchants. And I also decided in my practice, whoever comes to work in my office, I would train them that you don't undercut your fees and you charge what is minimum, and you try and give the maximum effort that you put into the drawing, which results in that an architect remains poor. But what was fascinating is that when you concentrate on a building, you design it well, that joy that you get in designing a building where the people occupy that building, they would enjoy that building. And where I started off with small 1 projects and 2 projects, some of my clients realized this, that there is doing the Indian community never used, they only used draftsmen, but they started using architects. And it was more challenging, but anyway. But at the back of my mind, I always wanted to go back to Pakistan to complete my medicine.
So would I be correct in saying that your story is a story of resilience, number one, because, your challenge, your eye challenge really is kind of a story of resilience and you know, throughout, it seems, your life, there was some kind of a struggle. I mean, the struggle with all of the bureaucracies of studying, first of all, the very small opportunity that there was to study, you not being able to study what you wanted to. And, you know, thank goodness you couldn't do medicine, because you wouldn't be here right now. And we wouldn't have benefited from everything that you've given to our community as architecture. And then, you know, eventually what you're beginning to talk about, the struggle of really just fighting against, I guess, a very twisted apartheid capitalist system that obviously kept certain people out and wanted to control certain things. I mean, to me, that's quite brave that you decided that you're not going to use, we won't mention which brick company's bricks, and you decided to look for companies that I'm guessing were run by people of color who were producing brick. So am I correct in saying that your story, at least what you've articulated right now, is a story of someone who is really in the struggle, but obviously in this sense, the struggle in architecture?
Yes, it is, you know, that one could sum it up like this, but you know, at the end of the day, when my experience in architecture is that I feel that the people who use architects are people who have got money. Because they've got money, whether to build a small cottage or to build a big one or a big building. They are people who don't understand buildings. But when they employ architects, architects explain to them, or rather, you know, they are given a space in which they can practice their talents or their profession. And I feel at the end, they still don't know how. They would say it's a good building, we enjoy it, but they don't know why they enjoy it. So as an introductory course, before anybody does any kind of course, they should do 1 year of architecture and then do the course that they want to do.
Yeah, so you're saying we all need architecture education.
One needs it because to me, it is something that I said, if I was to do it again, would I still go for architecture? From the start, I would say yes. In fact, I would say, you know, learn how to live. That's what architecture is about.
Wow.
The joys of living comes from that experience of call it invention, or you know, it's getting a deep understanding and being able to look at, you know, a brick is a pile of bricks. You can do one of two things. You don't use your head at all and just put up something. On the other one, take each of those bricks, understand those bricks, and detail them, understand the concept, and produce another building. The two buildings are totally different because one is without thinking. It's just to say run-of-the-mill buildings. And unfortunately, 90% of the buildings in the country are like that. We need to teach people how to use their money. But we don't, the other part of it is that I look back after 50 odd years of architecture, did I earn money out of it? I would say no. And that's the joy of it. That, you know, I'm going back to where I originally came from, you know, and when one gets to the next life, one can say at least all the corrupt temptations one is kept away from. And that's the best way to practice architecture, is to enjoy it. And, but in saying that I wanted to go back to medicine, I'd say yes, because, you know, when you do architecture, you're serving wealthy people who've got no end. They would try and see that you don't, and they would cut you down. And I've seen architects living not of the architecture they do, but of the kickbacks that they get from the merchants who produce those materials. And that's not architecture.
Can I just say, Uncle Aziz, I think maybe you're getting now to my next point that I'm going to ask you guys, which is about the association. When you start talking about corruption and all of those things, because I'm very interested in hearing what you guys have to say about our current situation in South Africa and what the role of associations like this one could be in this current context. But I think for now, I'm going to move to Auntie Linda. We're now finally with you. You have nowhere to escape. So could you just tell us briefly just about a little bit about yourself and about, you know, what's been making you take all these years?
Okay, thank you. It's nice being called aunt. I've gotten used to being called Mom Linda, and I embrace all the years. Yeah. The reason why I asked you to start with Mohammed and Aziz is that my story is, in a sense, opposite, not opposite. I'm a beneficiary. I'm a child of freedom. I'm a beneficiary of free and independent countries. I'm South African by birth, paper, and heritage. Nolo, who we drove here, first thing she asked is, "Where are you from?" I'm like, Randburg. Says, "No, are you from England or wherever?" I said, "I'm South African by birth, paper, and heritage." I left South Africa as a child, 5 years and 2 weeks, 1961, with my parents and 2 brothers, for what would then be 32 years of exile. We spent a year in, it was called Southern Rhodesia at the time. My parents were in education. And as you said earlier, I think we're talking about it, what Amira was saying, that everything is connected. So Southern Rhodesia, bear in mind, 3 decades later, it becomes Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. And my father was a fine artist and university lecturer. And he was he founded the first industrial design school on the continent of Africa in 1964 at the University of Nairobi. So my family, we grew up with art, design thinking, creativity. And my brothers and I, 2 of us, two brothers and myself, we naturally, without it ever being discussed, all of us studied architecture. Wow. It was just in the family. Wow. So in terms of positionality, let me state that. In Ghana, we also grew up on campuses. Ghana became independent in 1957 under Kwame Nkrumah, and we were at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, where my father headed the fine arts department there. And so my first primary schools were on campuses in Rhodesia at the university. And you can imagine being on campuses. A campus is a space, is a place of ideas. You live in a world of ideas. And after Ghana, we moved to Kenya for founding of the Industrial Design School at the University of Nairobi. Again, campuses, the whole sort of social, political, economic maelstrom of newly independent countries, that oomph which is in the air, that you know, we have power, we own our country, we can make our country ours, our way, you know. So you grow up as a child in that kind of milieu, and it is unsurprising, really, that you would have chosen the creative, the creative work. In all, I probably went to about 8 primary schools, 2 of which were my parents, because after Ghana, we went to visit my aunt in Uganda. And because we were children, because we were tourists, we couldn't be registered in school. So my mother just got the East African curriculum, got a chalkboard, we're in my aunt's house, put up the chalkboard, took over the dining room and the kitchen. So the kitchen was the art room, and schooled us for 3 months while my father was in Europe. And then we moved to Kenya, and she got a job immediately to start. We were in Kenya because he had that job to start with the backing of the international design community. And the importance of design thinking, because so many people have asked, how did your father teach you? And I do think that he applied design thinking, because he taught us for about 5 weeks till we entered the school system in Kenya, because now my parents had work papers, work permits, were settled, we're living in university houses. And it's the first time that I came up against what was racism, but as children, we didn't recognize it. The school we went in was Westlands. We could just walk around the corner, like around the corner to the car park. And Kenya was independent in 1964, and we were there 3 months later. And people would ask, are there any other African children? And we're like, I don't know, we'll have to wait to see. And so we're looking to see, because it never occurred to us that there were different races. And about the kinds of, I'm trying to speak to the issues that are coming up here, was that the teacher, that is, everybody was white in that school. This is just because Kenya had a settler community. And set us a test, and I came first, and she was so delighted. And I thought, gosh, this is a nice teacher, you know. Later, I discovered from my parents that she was a white South African teacher, and she was like, you know, this black South African child. Now, my brother also had a test in his, and he came first, but the reaction in his was his classmates wanted to beat him up, you know. And so at break time, he came rushing over, sister, I need reinforcements, you know, there's going to be a big fight outside the school gates. So I was waiting for 1:45, the clock. And as soon as the bell, I was running across, hurdling over hedges, you know, but the headmaster had heard the rumors, you know. So I got there to find him holding apart two boys, you know, all ready to fight. And he asked that the parents of the boys come in. Now, my father's 6'4", and when he pitched up, the white father of the other boy wilted like, and that settled it. But what happened was that my parents then took, and maybe this is relevant for us here, my parents then took active responsibility in everything to do with the children. Anything to do with school, they were there, you know. So whether it was open day or science day or swimming or, you know, especially sports day, and coming to confidence. I remember that in sports day, you have the parents and children's races. And my brother did the sack race with mom, and then I did the egg and spoon race with my father, you know. And I've never forgotten it, even as an adult, that I was worried that we hadn't practiced. And he said, no problem. Just your job is to concentrate on the egg in the spoon. I will get us to the finish line. So I climbed onto his shoulders, and when he rose, I was the highest. I could see over the hedges of the sports field, and all I did was concentrate on this egg in a spoon. And the other fathers were busy trying to run, and of course they were dropping the eggs and everything. My father just strode to the finish line, and they gave us a little silver cup because we came first, you know. So literally, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We all have parents. We have at least, we have grandparents, you know. All I'm saying is that look to the strengths. Our ancestors did not leave us wounds, you know, they left us strengths. And sometimes when I'm in critical situations and I'm like, Papa said, concentrate on the egg and the spoon. My job is to get us to, and he just leisurely walked across. Now, my father died in Nairobi, 67. So my mother was a widow with 3 children, and then we moved to Zambia. 2 more schools, and then high school in Zambia. But I went back to Kenya for A levels. And then after that came the question of university, because you're a South African child without a country of your own in other people's countries. And these countries are independent, and the priority of those countries is to take care of their citizens. And I remember being very anxious as I was completing A levels, that what am I going to do? Because universities in Africa start in September. You finish high school in December. So there's 9 months. And as a child, you have no legal bearing anyway. You're simply you're dependent of an adult who has a work permit, you know. And to my huge surprise, the Zambian government, this is a country which is not my own, they slapped together a work permit, gave me a job, high school job teaching art, math, and history. So at 19, I was a high school teacher, and of course just went crazy teaching art as well as math. Later, I remember that may have been 2 decades later in Zimbabwe. Brilliant move, brilliant thinking. The president of the country decided not to have a presidential plane, but to have a plane which can convert into a passenger plane, you know, and about things being connected. I was flying with a client to Great Zimbabwe, and the pilot announced, you know, the usual announcements. The pilot said he'd like to welcome his math teacher, you know. So they were all clapping, looking down the aisle.
Where's the maths teacher?
Where's the math teacher? I'm also clapping. You know? And then he came out and said, Miss Mvusi, you taught me math. And the whole plane just went. That pilot landed that plane so smoothly. And the funniest thing is that when we disembarked, all the passengers were shaking my hand. So, you know, there are these really precious, what you're saying about moments.
Yes.
There are these moments which belong not just to you, but to everybody in your ecosystem, and you never know how your ecosystem evolves. I applied to, because I was insistent that I wanted to study architecture in Africa. I was adamant about that. And the scholarship bodies, one, they did not want any African studying architecture. Why don't you do medicine? Why don't you do agriculture? I'm like, medicine, and to be followed all the days of my life by the sick and dying. No. I have to deal, I want to deal with creative.
Uncle Aziz one.
There you are.
Sure.
But already my mind was working that way. And that was the best decision of my life, to immerse myself in both traditional and contemporary modern architecture and environments and those kinds of challenges. So the first 4 years I did BSc design, to my great surprise, top of the class, the Frank Lloyd Wright Prize, all of that. And then you realize how small, because when you're in exile, the whole of the rest of the world is your backyard.
Mm.
The one place that you don't go to, and it was always like this white out. Remember we had Tipex? It's like this country called South Africa, I sort of knew its shape, but it was like Tipexed out. I had no idea, we never learned any history or geography or anything about it. So it was this like white hole, you know, my first job as working as an architect was back in Zambia, and best 2 years, because in Africa, and I would say this to all of you, in Africa, we have space, we have opportunities, we are not crowded out, we have so many resources. I'm saying it's the best 2 years because I got thrown in the deep end. I was actually, this is the year between doing your final 2 years. I was actually in charge of clients, conceptualizing, designing, supervising from scratch. And when you do that kind of visceral work, you know your architecture. You know it absolutely thoroughly. So by the time I went for my second degree in England, big surprise, Northern England, University of Newcastle upon Tyne. I was the most experienced person in my graduate class. Again, about how small the design community is that most of the design lecturers and leading designers in Europe and the States were actually friends of my late father, you know. So while as a foreigner, as a foreign student, there was always that protection. And I didn't realize until much later that they went out of their way to create this safe and secure space without my being aware as an exiled child. You know, I just want to point out, because I think I said it in one Zoom, but I forget, that when I was at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne, my thesis got stolen. I'd submitted it. It was marked, and now it was to put it in the registry. And I'd made a second copy to go to my scholarship funders in London. I get a call about 7 a.m. from Professor Miles Danby, who had been in Ghana when there's children. And he says, very calmly, Linda, do you have a spare copy of your thesis? And I'm like, and they said, why don't you just come down to the faculty? So I walk down, I go up to the dean's office, and it's like, deans, you know? And they say, all right, we have a slight problem. You know how English is. We have a slight problem. The registry has been broken into, and nothing's missing except your thesis. Now, Newcastle is an extension of Durham University, and it's Oxford, Cambridge, Durham. These are the oldest universities. Never in the history of Durham, Newcastle had a registry being broken into. And I was like, well, I know I posted registered mail. Let me phone the scholarship office. And I remember the director saying, Linda, we're here with the police. The office has been broken into. And the only thing that seems to be missing is your thesis, because it was I received it yesterday, registered mail, and I looked at it. It wasn't even my in tray, it's in my pending tray. It's missing, So I'm thinking, why would anybody go steal a thesis on Adobe Mud? You're fascinated with bricks, I was fascinated by Adobe from. And it turned out to be, ta-da, South African spies, boss.
Wow.
They broke into the university and in London, same night, to steal my thesis. And it never occurred to me what the connection was. And graduating in Newcastle, because you'll get there as you graduate, the graduation process is like a conveyor belt. You have so many students too. So you all just go tap down and and as I was walking up, and I remember that the faculty had a photographer for us, our class. I remember thinking, people have. As I walked up, the deans, the chancellors, the vice chancellors stood up and they paused proceedings. And I didn't hear it, but others did, where they said, this is the first South African graduate in architecture. We're pausing because it's a historic moment.
Maybe we should clap for that. We'd like to enjoy that moment as well.
The point is, it shouldn't have happened. It was apartheid. Thank you for clapping. But can you imagine where we would be as a country if we did not have apartheid? Why did it have to wait? So this is the degree of racial and state racism and oppression that to some extent probably still exists, or vestiges of it still exist. And as you can see, we're old and gray-haired and we're veterans, and sometimes we feel tired, but maybe this is your challenge. This would be your challenge. The rest, it was 32 years of exile. I returned to South Africa in 1992. Yes. And even that was precipitous. But I'll just put two examples. When I went to Zimbabwe to work, and this is the importance of institutions. When I went to Zimbabwe to work, there was an Ethiopian architect, a major Ethiopian architect, who had set up a practice in Zimbabwe. And his was the first Black-owned architectural firm in Zimbabwe. And the establishments, the old Rhodesian and white Zimbabweans, were anti-him because the new Zimbabwean government projects were coming out on a roster. And they obviously didn't want it to go to a foreigner, let alone a Black company. And I was in the States at the time, and he had asked me, will I come and be the lead designer on this project? It's coming through with. And so I flew in to Zimbabwe to work on that project and ended up there for 5-7 years. A year after designing that, I think that's the building which is on the video loop. There's a Ministry of Higher Education building. I opened my architectural practice. And here I just want to stress that oppression is total. And I speak to you men, because men tend to define oppression and yet they're only talking about themselves. And then what happens is that women are left on their own to fight. What happened was the lawyers happened to be former students of my parents when we were in Rhodesia. So they're very excited to register my firm, but they were very nervous. They didn't know how to tell me, and we're sitting in the office. And so they said, will you get your husband to sign? I'm like, why would I bring a husband into my profession? Said, well, in Zimbabwe, women are not allowed to register a company without a man. Like, what? Said, can you give me the phone? Can you give me the phone? Gave me the phone. I dialed Tanzania because my brother is an architect who was working in the ANC settlements. Said, Zama, get yourself to Dar es Salaam. I am sending a return ticket to Dar es Salaam airport. You're flying here to Zambia, to Zimbabwe. This is 3 countries away, to co-sign. You'll be my sleeping partner. I don't think my brother asked anybody in ANC any permission. He just drove. You know, it helps to be the eldest, you know, all the others, they follow your lead. He flew in from the airport. I fetched him. All the papers were there. He signed. We walked across to the bank, co-signed, did all the legal work. And my mother was just so happy, just saying, my goodness, my 2 children working together. But what did happen was that because he was working for ANC, there's no salary there, you know, was that he was able to access the company account, my Jeep, the place that I was renting. So he could take himself and his wife on vacation, you know, but he was continuing with his work. And people say, well, why didn't you? I said, no. This is a battle for the Zimbabwean women and Zimbabwean men to fight. You need to pick your own battles, in a sense. Fast forward 5 years later, in Zimbabwe, no comment about what's happening in South Africa right now. Work permits were 2 years, maximum 2 years. So every 2 years, my expatriate friends and I would all meet in the Home Office. It had a large waiting room, you know, and it was like a great party. We're all catching up, you know, parties, what have you, lunches, etc., as we're moving in the queue. And when I got to the queue, this is 92. It's my turn, we have a number, go up. And this is 2 years after Nelson Mandela has been released. Liberation movements in exile have returned into South Africa. And this immigration officer said, you South Africans, who do you think you are? When we Zimbabweans were getting independence, they moved us, they shipped us from Mozambique and Zambia in cattle trucks in the open wagons, train, you know. You South Africans, who do you think you are? They're even flying you to your country. And he just took a stamp and bang on my passport. I look, it's red. It says deported, 7 days. It's the first time I'd ever seen a deportation. And I don't know what kept me cool. I said, 7 days? You think your country's all that? Watch me leave in 5. And when I turned around, the waiting room was empty. If all my expatriate friends have decided this is not the day they're going to get there. They don't want to deal with these immigrants. So they're downstairs in the pavement, and it was a rush. 5 days, tax clearance, what have you, you know, packing. my mother's 3 dogs, you had to get them, you know, I had friends now who work for UNHCR, and they'd asked me earlier, why aren't South Africans coming to register to be repatriated to South Africa under the UN? And I was saying, well, I explained. So I phoned and said, Linda, we can get you onto the plane on the fifth day. You know, it was just like a mad rush. Clients, calling up clients, closing accounts, what have you, equipment, everything else, because I was splitting the studio as well as the house. And on day 5, I see a black Mercedes-Benz at the gate with the Zimbabwe flag, now only ministers fly flags. And I said to the housekeeper, I don't want any Zimbabwean official in this house. I'm leaving tomorrow, I'm on the flight. And so he had the great honor of going to the gate to tell the minister that they're not allowed to come in. Madam says you cannot come in. He went to a friend of my mother who had been a minister. And 30 minutes later, I see the same car. And of course, this is my mom's friend, you know, so I can't say, hi, auntie, you can't come. And she said, and I find this extraordinary to this day, that the president of the Republic of Zambia, the Honorable Dr. Robert Gabriel Mugabe, he had learned in a cabinet meeting that he saw my name on deportation and he dispersed, suspended the cabinet meeting and said all the ministers to go and retract. So the minister he had sent wanted my passport to go erase it. Says, we are not going to do to the daughter what Rhodesia did to the father. You know, you're talking about being in the struggle and everything else. And that is how small, how tight, how close the solidarity is, and the privilege of being born on this continent and being of this continent. To this day, I find it extraordinary that a president of a country which is not yours did that. Adjourned a cabinet meeting and sent those poor immigration officers, some were fired, I don't know, it was just such a scandal right across, you know. By then I had phoned my mother, my brother who are in South Africa that, you know, and using the metaphor of American football, you know, my brother says, I'll be your wide receiver, I'll meet you at Jan Smuts Airport. And so Mugabe said, you are an honorary daughter of Zimbabwe. And I realized at that point that it was actually gazetted. I did not know that there was such a thing. It was actually gazetted. And he said, you can live here as long as you want. You don't even have to work here. Like, why didn't they tell me this before? So I had to say, actually, I think I want to go back to South Africa. I'm ready, you know. So that is how I came home.
I think
And we can pick it up for you.
I think your story, for me, it's quite profound. That, I mean, can you imagine your thesis document, some apartheid police trying to steal? Some of us, we're embarrassed to show our thesis document. Yours, the apartheid museum came all the way to the UK to steal it. I think that's quite hectic. And you know, your story, I also grew up in universities because when my dad, just as he was released, he was teaching at UWC. And I really understand that feeling of growing up around campus. Actually, before he was even released, I was staying with my mother in her room while she was a student at UWC.
Yeah.
I went to eat at the cafeteria. I know that cafeteria vibe, polystyrene. I started at a very small age eating out of polystyrene. So I really relate with that. And I kind of get the sense that, you know, you had a lot of people around you, particularly because of your dad, who were just really,
And mother, yeah.
and your mom, who were really just supporting you in all kinds of spaces. I mean, from Kenya, there were people all the way to the UK, there were people, even in Zimbabwe, you couldn't escape.
Even in the United States, yes.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that really to me is the theme of what you're talking about, this really powerful network of support. As you're saying, you know, the way in which people come together. And really, to me, that is also, that's why I was talking about uncle and auntie. You know, I know because that's how I grew up as well. We used to have a place called Cowley House in Cape Town where the families of those who were visiting the prisoners would go there, and everyone was auntie and uncle. You know, we'd all have a long line where we collect food, and then you go onto the boat, go visit your family, probably get sick and vomit, and then come back and go your way. So that spirit really is the spirit that we grew up in, and that made a lot of what has happened today come to fruition in South Africa, is that spirit of people working together, you know, like you said, creating those communities when there was really nothing there. So I think, you know, for me, all the stories that you guys have told us create a wonderful context for who you are today. And I think what I'd like to know now is about the association. And given everything that you've told us, I'm already getting an inkling of why you guys ended up, you know, in this association in the first place, from everything that you've said here. But I want to know from you guys, any one of you could tell us maybe a little bit about the association, and then maybe to hear from each of you how the association was relating, or how it influenced, or how it supported your practice. So any one of you, maybe just give us a little bit of a background on the association, and then how it, you know, supported your practice. Maybe Uncle Mohammed.
I think we saw it as an opportunity to really introspect, you know, to start thinking at where we were currently in the position we're finding ourselves. Because after post 92 and 94, in terms of the 92, really when things started happening, we started seeing this opportunity. Opportunity, not so much in terms of economic terms, opportunity of creating a better place. And I think that spatial context, we saw that we needed to equip ourselves and almost to introspect in terms of our abilities and what we brought to the table in terms of that challenge that lies ahead. And I think for us as practice, because we were very much in small practice based, you know, small practices, not really understanding what challenges lie ahead and how we're going to do things differently. If that was the way our, you know, that is what the solution was. And we saw this as and also we needed to mutually support each other.
I mean, did you guys have like a manifesto? Like,
yes, we did.
You know, yes, so could you walk us through that? I mean, I'm almost imagining if you guys were like, you know, the Steve Bikos with afros and old clothes with patches on the elbows, writing manifestos. What was it like, that spirit?
Well, I remember it gave me a very exciting time. I'll be very honest with you, because it was exciting in the sense that for a start, we started to socially meet, because we were sort of very isolated, you know, each one in their own sort of, we started meeting and we started learning about each other. And I think for the first time, and I think Linda in that sense, for me, was very powerful in the sense she is speaking from the outside. And she told us about us that we had almost tend to take for granted, you know, what potential we had, what power we actually have, we grouped together. And I think just some of the mechanics of it was that we besides lobbying just for work, we started seeing the opportunity to improve in terms of the educational added network, you know, added elements to it. So we spoke about running master classes, you know, for the Association of Black Architects practitioners, and looking at practice in terms of as a speculative model. So to think of ourselves of just how we do something, how we do it differently.
So you were inventing
we
practice,
absolutely.
Inventing a vision.
what was also amazing, we started suddenly getting visitors from abroad. So there was like people like Max Bond from the States, the gentleman from Nigeria.
Yeah, he was the president of the International Union of Architects.
Architects.
When we launched, there was so much international support. It was like the world flew in. And I think it did shake the establishment. They could not believe, because for the first time, I think they had seen us, just for perspective, if I remember the figures, there were like 4,000 registered architects in South Africa, 100 of whom were white women, who I never saw. And we were 40 architects of color.
Registered.
Yeah, and the majority, because of what you mentioned about the specific permission given to Indians, the Ministerial Commission to Study Architecture, I think 3/4, maybe 30 were Indian. Let me say Asian, well, Black South Africans of Asian descent. Am I? Yeah, I think, yeah. So, you know, there was this establishment narrative of seeing us as a minority. And we're like, no, we represent the national majority. And amongst the four of us, this country is going to be shaped by what we in our, did we meet weekly or fortnightly?
Almost weekly at some point.
Weekly.
Yes.
It was so intense. We met weekly, and we met in one of the architects' businesses.
Yeah,
in
Pizza
Mayfair.
Hut, yes.
Was it Pizza Hut?
Yes.
Yeah, and we make sure that when we arrive, we all order from his business.
Yes.
You know, so that we're not taking up his business space. But it was incredibly intense. It was incredibly intense. And I remember, I don't know if you have any copies. I remember that we had a 10-point operational to-do list, and we gave ourselves 24 to 30 months.
So was there like a president and?
Actually, at this point, it's probably important to talk about late Peter Malafane, who was actually the first African architect to qualify from South African University. From, I think
Yes, from Lesotho. Yeah,
from Lesotho.
University of South. Yeah.
So Peter was our president.
Yeah. And then we were the three
vice presidents. I think there was a lot of concern that they saw this as a sort of a lobby group to get the work. I think it was beyond that. We also tried to educate the potential clients of the future on what potential lies. And I think probably what we're seeing now is probably people haven't bought into that vision.
Yeah.
You know?
So, tell us more about what was happening in terms of whose cages were you rattling at the time? I mean, who was getting hot and bothered by this little group that was established?
I think the institute themselves were very concerned. Suddenly we started getting phone calls. I mean, all these years they ignored us, but suddenly we got regular phone calls. The university bodies were calling us. We want the educational bodies to hire suddenly. So we suddenly became the people to call to find relevance. And Linda, you probably got those calls. I got calls like that. We were on the university board suddenly. When universities had problems, they suddenly called us up. When they had problems with Black students, they would call and say, how can we resolve this? So suddenly there was dialogue.
And even what they called Black students.
If I look at it, over this period of my practice, I've actually this racism, and there was always something that was talked about. At the end of the day, I say that it was all about human behavior patterns. And human beings they invent these patterns of theirs on totally unsubstantiated. You know, it's, you know, I had certainly got reverse people who previously I couldn't even consult with. They came over to me and said, "Can you give us a job?" And some practices would come and say, "Can we be partners with you?" So, because they will not be accepted if they are seen as a particular race group. But I saw these changes of habits and behavior happening. And you look across the world and it's the same thing. You look at the problems that are in the world today. It's all about how people behave, why they behave like that, one doesn't understand. You talk about Ukraine and Russia. It's the same people, same language. But one wants to operate their economy in a certain way, and then the other one says, no, it must be done, that the state is the owner of everything. But politicians get into their seats, or rather fight. They say they'll fight for the people if they get voted, and they do exactly the opposite once they get in. So one says they are never to be trusted. You do your own thing, and just leave them alone, because it's just a waste of time. But you look at I mentioned that I came from Pakistan. You look at Pakistan today, Imran Khan, by popularity, gets voted in. And yesterday, I believe he's been put into jail for having his beliefs that, you know, that everything should be open and everything belongs to the people. And it's not that it belongs to the politicians. The politicians decide who should go to jail and who should not go to jail. It's not the judge that decides that. They decide that. But you know, you look at this happening in this country. You know, it's and I lost friends of mine when we were fighting for politics, and Timor, Ibrahim, Abu Bakr Aswad. Abu Bakr Aswad was both the brothers, Abu Bakr Aswad and his brother Ibrahim. We were all in Lahore. We all fought each other. They got there and they would send me the details of the college in Lahore. And that's how we all got there. So we were on the outside and then we came back here. But when I saw the friends that I was losing, I mean, and also the practices against, you know, racial practices. I mean, you look at Judge Muhammad. I used to meet Judge Muhammad on the going to the Free State to fight court cases there. But he was a lawyer, attorney, but he was never allowed to be a judge during the apartheid days. And yet, when the same people, the same government, you know, had to accept him as Chief Justice of the country, you know, after refusing him to be even an attorney to fight a court. So when he, you know, but and here there was, you know, so I look at politics and say it's you know, that same person go through his lifetime and see how he suffered. You look at another person who's worth nothing, and he gets promoted to the highest seats. And if you ask which one of the politicians, even up to now, you know, if they are in charge of public works, which one of them are architects? See, none. So who's running the country? Who's shaping our country? This human behavior patterns must be unearthed, exposed, and written about, because you can't have a minister of public works being some unknown entity just because he's got a lot of friends, a lot of free lunches.
You know, you raised something, and I will now nearing my last questions. You raised something that is quite profound, and you know, I think about this quite a lot because my father, again, is still in politics, and he's one of the guys who's, you know, being pushed out because of his values, and you know, obviously in politics, particularly in the ANC, you have to operate within a particular way currently in order for you to maneuver. And some people don't want to operate in those ways, as you're saying. Some people do, and you know, they get ahead when they operate in those ways. And I wanted to just ask my second last question, really, which is what does the future hold for, you know, you guys come from a very particular background. All of us, at least some of us, feel a bit disillusioned about some of the things that are happening in our country. You had this organization, which was something that was very hopeful, looking into the future, visionary, and now we are where we are today. And my question is, you know, we still have a lot of problems, as you all know. You know, especially, and I'm talking specifically for people of color, still have many, many challenges. Women still, and particularly women of color, still have many, many challenges in this space where we are in architecture, in terms of architecture's role in cities and in developing our world. Still many, many challenges, particularly things that have to do with politics. You know, the very people who at some point was meant to be fighting the struggle that you guys come from are now disappointing us. You know, where do you think all of this is going? Where do you think the future is going? What do you think people like myself and other young people need to bear in mind? What could we learn? What lessons could we learn from yourselves and your experiences of this association that you created? Is it too hard of a question?
No,
It needs a
look, I think it's a
deliberation.
very broad thing, but I think for me, one of the biggest issues here, and I think it's about some of the issues are related to the housing challenges that we face in this country, you know, to provide shelter. And also at the same time to provide special places where people feel empowered and special. It's got nothing to do with how much money you have, or it's just about your daily life. That the person doesn't feel, you know, an outcast from, or, you know, from the happenings, and access to opportunity, and planning, and spatial planning, and spatial creation that gives access to that kind of opportunity. It's, for me, still probably one of the most important things.
Maybe let me be more specific. What is the role of associations like an organized group like what you had?
Yes.
Is there still a place for something like that? People who are activists who are trying to address these kind of things in architecture?
I think it is relevant, definitely it is. And I think probably, I mean, you know, for the first time, Royal Institute of British Architects head is
An
African.
yeah.
So, but it has come from organization that started there, an organization similar to ours called Society of Black Architects, SOBA, which I think Leslie Locko was one of the founding members of. And
that SOBA came to support us when we launched.
that's correct.
Yeah,
That's correct.
it's that old, you know.
I think if you look at the problem in this country, it's over how many centuries now, from the 16th century to now, especially the Black community. They've been paid substandard, minimal wages, something that is just maybe enough just to have one meal a day. But with the wages they received, especially referring now to the Black community, the wages that they received, they could never even, improve their own environment. They didn't have that. They couldn't provide for their children. So you had a whole family breakdown happening.
Yeah, it was
And this
legally
is,
impossible.
but if you look at it in the village settlements, I mean, if you go to further up, I've been to places like Malawi, but everybody there, the women are the builders. They would make up their mud bricks or whatever they are. They would have a little vegetable garden where nobody will come to say, you didn't get the planes passed, so you can't build that. They are free, they're doing what they're doing, and they're living, but it's a quality life. And where they work, they live in that area. And from there, they could lift themselves up. Somehow, the politics have always suppressed these people, moved them around. The wealthiest people, put politicians into their offices to suppress these people so that they could provide cheap labor only. And this is across Africa. This is happening. And you see the whole of Africa, if you look at it, it's the most underdeveloped of the rest of the countries. And like you said, there's so much. Africa has got space. Africa has got a climate. The reason why the people from the north came to Africa is because of their climate. It's
And land.
And land.
the land
Yeah.
is plentiful, it's fertile. Not only that, the mineral resources were already there, but it's countries that were wealthy that have just been milking the wealth and minerals of the country. Now, if you look at, if I say now, what's happened, we had power outages. We had power outages in this country daily until pressure was put onto the president. You do something about it now or else. And one visit and the power outages stopped. And then they found out the reason why the power outages were stopped is that coal that was being exported to other countries has stopped. So it's now being used in this country. So what's happening is that the people are not making the right decision. The president may be a good person, but is it that the president must go and visit that people who are providing that power to say, now tell me what's wrong? And they would say, well, unless we stop the export of the coal, we won't be able to solve the problem. And he then says, you stop it then. But does it mean that all the other ministers who've got portfolios are not doing their work? And must the president have to go to these ministers and tell them how to do their job? It's but if you look at it, the poor people have got, they haven't got, the only reason they are getting up before everybody else, they get up 4 a.m. and they are on buses and taxis and walking and pedaling or cycling or whatever they're doing, but they want to get there so that they could earn a living for the day. That's all they achieve. 30 days have passed all the earnings that they've had has been spent already. So when do they earn enough to be able to build up their own environments, of their own choice, of their own design, and give them the opportunity, give them the land. But what is happening is, even if you give them the land, they're so helpless that they will immediately cash it in because they need it for food. So we need to solve this problem and say, as architects, we need also to play our role to encourage the government. Public works is not working. It's not working. The money doesn't even get to a budget meeting level and it disappears. The moment there's allocation, the budget meetings are not even decided on by the people who should be building for the poor or helping the poor or infrastructure. The roads must be paid. And also the criminality that has come in. And you'll be surprised to find out that the criminals are not poor people. The criminals are the wealthy people. They are setting up. They know where the wealth is, and they know how to get to the wealth before you can get to it. And I think it's a huge problem because the country cannot come right unless it does that. And I must respect. In the early days, I had known Mangope. He's through a project that I did for a client in Rustenburg, and he was always a passenger in that with that client of mine. And I didn't query it because I thought it's one of his staff members. Then he introduced me as Mangope. Eventually became Chief Mangope. And when he called me in, please help him. Then we set up, if you look at Mafeking, or rather at that time, when Mangope became president, he called for me and I said that whatever housing we put up quality housing. And if you look at the cross, and I think he made every effort to do that. Thereafter, he said, I need to build something that will attract us. But he came up with the title that we need to create a kind of resort that will attract people from overseas to come to South Africa. And that's where he decided to put up the Sun City. One can criticize it, but he had the vision. And I said, I'm a small guy, I can't help you, but I've got a good town planner who taught me, this Professor Mellows, and we need to get his expertise to come here. And at that time, Saul Kersner was running one hotel in Durban. It's a small guy. Anyway, Mangope then employed Professor Mellows to set it, and Professor Mellows, because international people, all the landscaping was done by experts in that field. We put up a premises. Game reserve was put up. Landing airstrip was put up. And obviously it was done when there was parallel to that. What was happening is that the ANC was also playing its role in a much bigger way. And, but it was too much linked to the government of the day. Nationalist Party was in charge of this. So he fell into disagreement with the ANC that he was doing something. But when I look at it, I saw people dressed, they clothed, it was tatters. They were just, they didn't have clothes to wear. But within 3 years, all the children were well dressed, were well fed, they had excellent schools. All this, in the political turmoil, it all got burned down. But I say all that in my overall title of human behavior patterns, how people don't consult with each other, they don't respect each other. But every human being has got all the it's got its strength or power to do what they want to do. And if only discussions would take place, human beings would consult with each other and change their behavior patterns and move forward. And this is the only thing as architects we need to get that going, that respect each other. There are in this country people of different colors. But does it matter? Does it matter? Does color matter? Can you not look into the heart and mind of every human being that is born in the world? That there must, you look at when wars happen, this is what when wars happen, it's not solving. They don't solve, they destroy more, and they manufacture more kinds of artillery and bombs and atom bombs. And you look at America, supposed to be the most powerful nation in the world. They don't send food to Ukraine. They send military equipment to Ukraine. It means destroy more. Destroy more. We need to manufacture bombs and machines, guns and everything that destroys. So that is anti-architecture. And I say that human behavior pattern of the wealthiest nations of the world need to change. United Nations may be a United Nations. They are there, they're doing good work, but they're not in charge of the world. It's the wealthiest nations are in charge of the world, and they are the anti-architects, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. All right. No, Uncle Aziz, we hear you. I think everyone would agree that we need some kind of global elevation of consciousness, that people become more egalitarian than where we are today. Probably, trying to rise up to the kind of hopes that the three of you had when you began your journeys. I think that is definitely talking to the human condition. And I think all of us as architects, I believe architecture is, fundamentally utopian. We always want to envisage a better future. And I think everyone here, when they're designing, they're not designing to create a worse world. Otherwise, we might want to steal your thesis document. We want to design beautiful worlds. So I think I want us to pause there because I'd like to call on people to ask you guys questions. I think for me, I'm going to take from this that this is actually the Godfathers. I see you guys as the Godfathers,
I'm a woman.
and mothers, the Godfathers and Godmothers of architecture. And I think, you guys kind of, it feels like you really are the ones, the first in the beginning. And all of us are really building on what you started. So I would even say that the Association of Black Architects is not over. It's here. Here you see them, and you see them at WITS, you see them at UCT, you see them at UJ. They are all there. And I think, I'm very privileged and I'm, very humbled that you guys did that and that we're all benefiting from that. So thank you so much. I think we can open up the floor to questions. Thank you.
I was sitting next to our acting head of department, Dr. Nkambule, and we were just saying the whole time that the conversation is so interesting. It's so difficult to ask Dr. Mape to, cut it so that we can get to the questions, because of course we've got an online audience, and I think everybody's also probably developed an appetite as well in our physical audience. So what I'll do is I'm going to ask 2 questions from our online audience, and I'll ask that our audience that is here with us maybe save their questions so that when we're outside and taking a look at the exhibition, it can actually be a conversation with our esteemed guests. So the first question I'll ask, also just so that we can end of the session, is from Jabu Absalom Makubu, who is a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg. He says, thank you for the opportunity and this wonderful panel discussion. I'm interested to hear from the panelists their views on transformation of the architectural profession in South Africa and decolonization of architectural education. What do they believe is missing in our architectural curriculums?
I think I tried to address that at my talk last time, was the issue of spatial intelligence. And I think to recognize that within yourself and the communities that you come from, the spatial, the mental space of places and the communities that you come from. And what I'm saying is that both the formal knowledge base and the informal knowledge base needs to be understood and to be empowered, actually, and harnessed to really to transform the profession. I think we need to empower ourselves for the full potential that we have as an architect. I think whilst we talk of this utopian thing, architecture cannot solve the problems of the world. Remember that. Sometimes architects tend to be optimistic about it, but the issue is that I think, yes, we can offer hope, but I think to get full potential out of us and what we do, we need to understand the places we come from and things that are within us. Or sometimes that are not on the surface. It's something that you have to understand, and these needs to be exposed and fully harnessed and taken full potential.
Thank you very much. I'll take another question, which will be our last one for the night. Touching on the issues of, this question comes from Amorelang Mulai, who is actually a student in our department. He asks, touching on the issues of spatial planning, I was curious to know whether the panelists think the current existing planning of townships can be fixed for the people living there with its already set infrastructures, or do we look to the future to design better spaces that can possibly shed the load of the thousands of people that live within those spaces? These are loaded questions.
I think together with it's not only the town planner needs to play a better role, in planning. It's not just call it the. I'm sorry if I'm going to use it. It's the current township plans are just a grid of streets and blocks, and it is expected that the spatial planning will be done by the people who live there. The emergency is to provide shelters. How those shelters are designed, and they can be very economically designed. The one is the architect needs to brief the town planner, and the town planner needs to brief the land surveyor and so on. But they together need to work out how it will be acceptable as a settlement, and learn from the indigenous people how they have been doing it. And they are, in Africa, there are examples, just too numerous to mention. Peter Rich, in his book, I think he worked on some of these concepts of using even building methods. But I'm not saying the building methods that are known. There are so many. No, the most popular one is the stone and the brick buildings, or Slesto, or whatever material is available in the natural environment. That has been done. Let people work with their own choice of materials. But first of all, there needs to be a unit, a shelter unit to shelter the people from the environment, where the children are safe. And I think the rest is, I think if there's enough education, and people need to be educated, like I said, give them a first year, the people who are going to come and live there, brief them, tell them about what architecture is all about, or what settlements are all about. Give them that education that if you do it, if you set up your settlement or your neighborhood setups, that ideally how it should be done, and how if you use climate, because climate is important, you need to face your windows in a certain direction so you get morning sun or afternoon sun or midday sun, how to control. In the afternoon, you want to sit in the shelter. Towards the evening, you want to go more back to sun is in the morning. But I need, these are education, it needs to become part of maybe the educational education at school level, even that should be introduced. The teacher need not be an architect. The teacher only needs to say 3 or 4 times a year, the children who are being taught anything will be taught one day about the environment, about water, about electricity. So the children are educated as it becomes part of the educational system at school level. So that as they grow up, it is registered on their minds that when they are adults and do something of their own, they will learn to save enough money or savings to build those comfortable environments. And there are many examples of some things that are built, but the contractors themselves admit that they have only been told to provide the housing to last 3 years. That's all they've been told. And that money has been spent and it's gone. But what is quality environment? What is quality living? You don't have to be rich to enjoy life. You don't have to be rich to be sheltered. You can create your own shelter. And even if you're strolling through the desert, I can tell you, you'll find something that'll give you shade. And if you can't find a leaf, you'll find sand and lots of it. And you'll create a shelter for yourself under that sand. But you'll build a hut with it. Whatever you do. But it's what is called survival. Survival architecture is phase 1. Then luxury or architecture is something else. But all the different grades of living should be introduced to every student attending school. And this is how you provide a know-how so that everybody feels that they are equipped to do it. So that when the actual architect or the contractor or the builder or the developer comes into the picture, tell them this is the quality of housing that we want. Give a lecture to them. And only if you are qualified can you place yourself on the tender list. So these are all inputs that need to be done. We are a country that's starting, we're already from the 16th century. What have we really done? We've only provided accommodation of that kind of facility to the extremely wealthy people. We haven't addressed the bottom line at all. And that bottom line is the most important line that we need to address.
Ma'am Linda, yes, please, just before you do, Ma'am Linda has a few words to add to answer the question. And after that, I'll let Dr. Mabel close off the session.
Okay. One of the great things about ABA was that we were a polyglot, and we listened to each other. All our diverse experiences, prejudices, fears, sorrows. When I look at the world now, whether it's Hindus versus Muslims or whoever, we were all things, but we met weekly and we listened to each other. You listened to my exterior experience, and I really listened to you all, you know. And we agreed to disagree, but to keep talking. And we built this collegial culture, which also enabled us to review each other's work and also talk through our different political beliefs to come to a common thing. So the 10-point plan didn't come out as a 10-point plan. It came as a consensus that, all right, here we are, this is what we can do. One of the first things was that hope is not a plan. If you remember, after the flooding in New Orleans, that governor, mayor, kept saying, well, we had a hope. We hoped everybody would, hope is not a plan. So ours was an operational plan, a to-do list. And it had time and it had targets, whether it was universities, the different institutions, especially government. And we targeted both the apartheid government, a lot of it was saying no, no, no. And also the incoming government, which seemed obviously, but not so obviously, ANC, IFP was strong in Natal, blah, 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 and all of that. But what we did was that we tackled the commanding heights of the economy. We did not we did not waste our precious time. We were all running our own practices. And the only way we could fund ABA was from our fees from our own practices. So we're doing double the work. You know, we didn't call in management people, you know, experts to come in and tell us how to administer things. And critically, I would say, when it comes to South Africa now, you cannot continue, you cannot create your battle plans based on what the enemy said the battle should be. I mean, it makes no sense, you know. If you understand, I mean, even these terms, township, I remember you had to tell me, why is this called a town and this is called a township? There are actual laws and bylaws. It's in the law books governing what is permissible in so-called suburb, quote unquote, white area, and what is incredibly permissible, you know. So it's not an accident. It's not accidental. It's not from the will of the people that. And I would disagree with you. We as a continent, we as a country, we as a people, we deserve far more than shelter, you know. And if I would say to you, going back to who we were 30 years ago, was that we understood that we deserved far more. We didn't even bother to embrace or try to understand what apartheid intended. That was not our plan. We did not create apartheid. What we set about to do was to create the commanding heights of where freedom necessarily had to take place. So we brought out entirely different kinds of school plans. And we went to banks and said, here's a school plan for Orange Farm, fund it. And I remember we're sitting in the lobby and you could see the bankers running around with our plans on the mezzanine. They were so shocked. They'd never seen a design of a school like this for students of color. And that shook the bank. And the bank ran across to ANC and said, what kind of educational policies do you have for the future of South Africa? And you know what? It started from a design. We sat down and we practiced. Our politics was not words. We sat down and we created projects. We said, what kind of a clinic would we like in the new South Africa? We didn't wait for a client. Remember? We looked at houses, or not even houses. We looked at livable spaces, streets, railway lines, stations. What kind of village space is best for raising children, for being able to walk to work, pollution, climate, as you said. And we designed it. We sat and designed it in between running our practices. And then we sought out and we met people, said, look, this is a very good idea for having a node, an economic node, densification here, et cetera, et cetera. You and I worked on Newtown. That was an idea which came out of ABA. It was not commissioned. We funded it from our own fees.
Yes.
You're looking at Mohammed Mayet, who designed the air rights. Because at least when you've lived and worked outside South Africa, you know that every piece of land has air rights. You can buy it, you can use it, But there we had Transnet, railways, airports, what have you. We had ideas. Transnet came to us. Transnet came to us. So I remember that at a certain point I was commissioned for Park Station, the 16 blocks of the biggest railway station, transport hub on this continent. And Transnet asked that can we develop the air rights over all those railway tracks? Because the problem was that Braamfontein was divided from Johannesburg CBD. And they were all there ready to say, okay, we can fly an expert. So said, no, we have an expert, Mohammed Mayet, ABA. You came in, So what I would say to you is, especially as designers, you must understand that you have the most, it's probably the last of the Renaissance professions. Because everything, whether it is law, finance, economics, materials, conceptualization, design thinking, it's what we do. And I'll just leave with my inspiration, which came from my dean at university in Ghana, who said to me that coming back to what should South African educational institutions be doing? He said, you're the only foreign student in your class. In this school, Kwame Nkrumah National University of Science and Technology, we are building you to be an agent, to be a change agent. As you said, 70% of structures in Africa are built by Black women. They can build far better than you. We are skilling you, educating you, training you, so that even if you are dropped in the middle of the Sahara and there isn't any other professional construction professional anyway, that community will look to you. So I had to pass math, I had to pass structures. Because if that community needed a bridge, they're coming to you, the architect. You've been to university, ne? So design us a bridge. You better do it, you know. A granary, you better do it. You are the constructor, you are the agent of the community. Not the elite, as we say, the community, you know. And wherever you are, if you remember that, and also I'll just say, what does one believe in? I'll take this from my LinkedIn. I was surprised that I even wrote this, is that the central key, the wealth in an architect is the inordinate, it cannot be measured, the inordinate origination of value and beauty. If you cannot bring that to the table, trust me, the community who would have commissioned you can design their buildings far better than you. So you need to come with a premium. You need to come with, you need to come with, and I'll just end up with the term beauty, because I learned very early on that beauty is a verb. Beauty has power. The original concept of beauty on this continent is that in a place of ugliness, think about it, in a place of ugliness, violence, whatever, if you bring in one thing of beauty and you put it there, it immediately beautifies where it's at. So beauty cannot be underrated. I would say it is at the core. If you cannot bring beauty, and it's a verb, stay home. Stay home. Go to the spa.
On behalf of our department here at TUT, the Department of Architecture and Industrial Design, we are really grateful that, you know, you chose our platform to tell your story, your stories, and there's lots of value that comes with it. Much of our live audience is the majority of our students over here, and I'm quite sure that, you know, they got their money's worth, and even more so, added, you know, educational value from this session. Thank you so much. I invite Dr. Mayet to close off the session.
Thank you so much. I think, yeah, I also will just make one last comment that, you know, what you've just said now, and for me, what you guys represent, you know, people don't know that Soplaki traveled a lot and met with Du Bois, you know, in the 1800s, early 20th century. And some of the things that they were discussing was, what is the future modern African look like? What is that? So imagine they were using imagination to try and create this picture in their minds. Right now, all we know of Africans is that we are, you know, mentally and economically enslaved. We answer to a master, you know, so you can imagine what an African was at that time. And they had to sit down and use their imagination to try and design the future African. You know, and when I think about that somebody had to sit down and design what the future African looks like, it makes me really think, well, that project can be extended to what does a future Africa look like? What does a future modern African woman look like? What do future African children look like? You know, so for me, what you guys were beginning is really a project that continues the work that people like Soplak and Du Bois were doing. When you talk now about the fact that you guys were sitting and you were like, what is a future hospital gonna look like? What is a future clinic gonna look like? you were really doing the kind of, I mean, they had to sit down when they were designing the Freedom Charter. This is later, obviously. What will the future of liberty look like? What will the future of law look like? And so I think, you know, what you guys did really is part of that narrative. And I think we need to all recognize that that was what was happening. Maybe you guys weren't conscious at the time that we are actually continuing the work of Du Bois, the work of even Fanon, who themselves were also doing similar kinds of things. What is the future of a healthy human being who doesn't think that they are above someone else or who doesn't think that they're below someone else? That was really the same kind of thing. And I really want to close there to make us all recognize that we're still in that project. We're still in the project of inventing the African man, the African woman, inventing the new African architecture, new cities, and all the things that, you know, I think we are all here knowing that we deserve. Like you say, we all deserve that kind of beauty. So I want to thank you very much for the work that you've done, for the inspiration that you've given us, and that we are all indebted to that. And much respect to you for doing that. Thank you. So I think we can close here. You're all welcome to come and look at the exhibition outside and help yourself to some drinks. And please speak of godmothers and godfathers and, you know, be amongst greatness. Thank you, everybody.